Staff Sergeant Michael Porter found the letter in a metal box hidden beneath floorboards in a Taliban compound. Porter's hands were still shaking from the firefight that had ended 5 minutes earlier. 3 insurgents dead. Porter's squad intact. Standard raid, standard outcome. Until Porter opened that box and saw handwriting Porter recognized immediately. The letter was in English. It listed American patrol routes, safe house locations, upcoming operations, information that should have been classified, information that was getting soldiers killed. And the handwriting belonged to someone in Porter's own unit, someone Porter trusted, someone Porter called friend. What Porter didn't know was that this discovery would lead Porter down a path where every choice was wrong, and the only way to save lives was to destroy everything Porter believed in. Before we go further, drop your name and what city or country you're watching from in the comments. I want to see how far this story reaches across the world. Porter stared at the letter. Porter's mind refused to accept what Porter's eyes were seeing. The handwriting was distinctive, neat, precise. The same handwriting Porter had seen on duty rosters, mission briefings, personal notes. The handwriting of Lieutenant Kevin Hayes, Porter's platoon leader and closest friend for 3 years. Sergeant Novak called from outside the compound. Novak said to Porter, "Porter, we need to move. Command wants us back at base for debriefing." Porter folded the letter quickly. Porter shoved it into Porter's vest pocket. Porter's mind was racing. This had to be a mistake. A forgery. Taliban trying to sow discord among American forces. It couldn't be real. Hayes wouldn't betray his own men. Hayes had saved Porter's life twice, had stood as best man at Porter's wedding via video link, had held Porter when Porter cried after Porter's daughter was born, and Porter couldn't be there. But the handwriting didn't lie. Back at Forward Operating Base Copper, Porter went through the motions. Debriefing, equipment check, meal, shower, all mechanical. All while that letter burned in Porter's pocket like acid. Porter needed to examine it properly, needed to compare it to known samples of Hayes's writing, needed to prove Porter was wrong. That night, while the rest of the unit slept, Porter sat in the empty communications room. Porter had brought samples. A duty roster Hayes had written last week. A birthday card Hayes had sent to Porter's wife. Notes from a mission briefing. Porter laid them beside the letter from the Taliban compound. The handwriting matched. Perfectly. Every loop, every slant, every detail. Porter felt something die inside Porter's chest. This was real. Hayes was feeding intelligence to the Taliban. Hayes was responsible for the ambush 3 weeks ago that killed Corporal Anders, for the IED that wounded Specialist Lynch, for every close call and near miss that should never have happened. But why? Hayes wasn't ideological, wasn't sympathetic to the insurgency, wasn't motivated by money as far as Porter knew. What could make a decorated officer betray his own men? Porter needed answers. But confronting Hayes directly could be suicide. If Hayes was desperate enough to commit treason, Hayes might be desperate enough to silence Porter. Porter needed evidence first, needed to understand the full scope before making a move. Over the next 3 days, Porter watched Hayes. Every movement, every conversation, every moment Hayes thought no one was paying attention. Hayes seemed normal. Stressed, but everyone was stressed. Tired, but everyone was tired. Nothing obviously suspicious. Then Porter noticed the pattern. Every third night, Hayes volunteered for radio watch. Alone, 2 to 4 in the morning, the quietest hours. And the next day, without fail, there would be some kind of incident, an ambush, an IED, a sniper attack, always precisely where American forces would be. Porter needed to see what Hayes was doing during those radio watches. On the 6th night, Porter faked illness, told the medic Porter had food poisoning, got excused from duty, stayed in Porter's bunk until 0200 hours. Then Porter crept through the darkened base toward the communications bunker. Porter found a position where Porter could see through a gap in the sandbags. Hayes sat at the radio console. Hayes looked around nervously. Then Hayes pulled out a small encrypted satellite phone. Not military issue, Personal. Illegal to have in a combat zone. Hayes dialed, waited, spoke quietly in what sounded like Pashto. Porter didn't speak the language well, but Porter caught enough words, coordinates, times, unit designations. Hayes was actively calling the Taliban, giving them real-time intelligence. Porter's hands clenched into fists. Porter wanted to burst in, to grab Hayes, to beat answers out of the traitor who'd gotten Anders killed. But Porter forced Porter's self to stay hidden, to watch, to gather evidence. Hayes finished the call. Hayes deleted the call log from the satellite phone. Hayes returned to the official radio, making routine check-ins as if nothing had happened. Perfect tradecraft. If Porter hadn't been watching, Porter would never have known. Porter returned to Porter's bunk. Porter didn't sleep. Porter couldn't stop seeing Anders's face, Lynch's injuries, all the close calls that suddenly made terrible sense. And Hayes, Porter's friend, the man Porter trusted more than anyone else in this godforsaken war. At dawn, Porter made a decision. Porter went to Captain Odom, the company commander. Porter requested a private meeting, urgent. Odom agreed, curiosity evident on Odom's face. In Odom's office, Porter laid out everything. The letter, the handwriting analysis, the pattern of attacks, the satellite phone. Porter watched Odom's face shift from skepticism to shock to cold fury. Odom said to Porter, "These are serious accusations, Sergeant, against a decorated officer, your friend. You understand what this means if you're wrong?" Porter said to Odom, "I understand, sir, but I'm not wrong. Hayes is the leak. Hayes has been feeding the Taliban our operations for months, maybe longer." Odom studied the evidence. Odom's jaw tightened. Odom said to Porter, "We need to move carefully. If Hayes suspects we know, Hayes could rabbit. Or worse. We need to catch Hayes in the act. Undeniable proof. They planned a trap, a fake operation, classified. Only Hayes and a handful of officers would know the details. False patrol route, false timing, false objective. If the Taliban showed up at that location, it would prove Hayes was the source. If you're watching this and your heart is racing right now, do me a favor. Hit that like button and subscribe for more true military stories. And let me know in the comments where you're watching from, your name and city. Let's build this community together. The fake operation was scheduled for 3 days later, a supposed reconnaissance mission to a village 15 kilometers north. The real team would be hidden nearby, watching to see if insurgents appeared. Porter watched Hayes during the briefing. Hayes's face showed nothing unusual. Hayes took notes, asked tactical questions, played the part of a concerned officer perfectly. But Porter knew that within hours, Hayes would pass that information to the enemy. That night, Hayes took radio watch again. Porter and Captain Odom watched from concealment. They saw Hayes make the call, saw Hayes pass the coordinates, saw Hayes seal Hayes' own fate. The next morning, Odom called Hayes to Odom's office. Porter was there, along with 2 military police officers. Hayes entered, saw the setup, and Hayes' face went pale. Odom said to Hayes, "Lieutenant Hayes, you're under arrest for treason, conspiracy, and providing material support to enemy combatants." Hayes didn't deny it. Hayes just sat down heavily, Hayes' shoulders slumping. Hayes looked at Porter with something like relief mixed with despair. Hayes said to Porter, "You found the letter." Porter said to Hayes, "Why, Kevin? Why would you do this?" Hayes laughed bitterly. Hayes said to Porter, "You think I had a choice? You think I wanted to betray my own men?" Odom said to Hayes, "Everyone has a choice, Lieutenant." Hayes shook Hayes' head. Hayes said to Odom, "No, not when they have your interpreter's family, not when they send you videos of them torturing children, not when they tell you one more piece of intelligence or they'll mail you pieces of a 6-year-old girl." The room went silent. Porter felt the floor tilt under Porter's feet. Porter said to Hayes, "What are you talking about?" Hayes looked up at Porter, tears in Hayes' eyes. Hayes said to Porter, "Amira, my interpreter. She's been with us for 2 years. Smart, brave, helped save dozens of lives. Her family stayed in a village we thought was secure. 3 months ago, the Taliban took them, her parents, her 2 little sisters. They sent me proof. Told me I'd been identified as someone who worked closely with local nationals. Told me they'd execute the whole family unless I cooperated. Odom said to Hayes, "You should have reported this immediately." Hayes said to Odom, "To who?" "To you. So you could tell me it's unfortunate, but we can't negotiate with terrorists. So you could remind me that operational security takes priority." I tried going through channels, quietly, requesting a rescue operation. I was told there were no available assets, that one family wasn't worth risking American lives. So I made a choice. I gave them information, tried to give them stuff that wouldn't get anyone killed. Old patrol routes, abandoned positions, but they knew when I was lying. They sent me a video of them cutting off one of the girl's fingers. Told me next time it would be worse. Porter sat down. Porter's world was spinning. Porter said to Hayes, "Anders died because of your intel. Lynch was wounded. How many others?" Hayes's face crumpled. Hayes said to Porter, "I know. God, I know. Every night I see their faces. But what was I supposed to do, Michael? Let them torture children?" Amira trusted me. Trusted us. Her family helped Americans because they believed we'd protect them. And when they needed us, when they were in real danger, our command said they weren't worth saving. So I made a choice. A terrible choice. But I couldn't let those kids die. Odom said to Hayes, "You let American soldiers die instead." Hayes said to Odom, "I tried to minimize it. Tried to give information that wouldn't be too damaging. But they kept pushing, kept threatening. And every time I hesitated, they'd send another video. Another proof they were serious. I was trapped. Damned if I cooperated, damned if I didn't. At least this way, maybe Amira's sisters had a chance." Porter felt torn in half. Part of Porter wanted to rage at Hayes for the betrayal. For Anders, for Lynch, for every soldier put at risk. But another part understood. Understood the impossible choice. Understood that Hayes had been backed into a corner where every option led to death. Porter asked Hayes, "Where is Amira's family now?" Hayes said to Porter, "I don't know. The last video was 2 weeks ago. They could be alive. They could be dead. I've been operating blind, just hoping my cooperation was keeping them alive." Odom said to Hayes, "You should have trusted us, Lieutenant." Hayes said to Odom bitterly, "I did trust you. I reported the kidnapping through proper channels. I begged for help. And I was told to let it go, that we couldn't allocate resources for every local national who got in trouble. You abandoned them, sir. Not me." An uncomfortable silence filled the room. Because Hayes was right. The military had a policy. Local nationals were assets, not family. Their safety was secondary to operational priorities. It was harsh but necessary in a war zone. Or so the reasoning went. But it meant that people like Amira's family, who'd risked everything to help Americans, were expendable when things went wrong. And that policy had just turned a loyal officer into a traitor. Porter said to Odom, "Sir, what if we could rescue them, Amira's family? What if we could prove Hayes's cooperation was coerced, that Hayes was trying to save innocent lives?" Odom said to Porter, "That doesn't excuse treason, Sergeant." Porter said to Odom, "No, sir, but it explains it. And if we can bring those hostages home, we might be able to argue mitigating circumstances. Hayes made a bad choice, but Hayes made it trying to save lives. That has to count for something." Odom considered this. Odom said to Porter, "Even if I agreed, we don't know where they're being held. We don't have actionable intelligence." Hayes spoke up. Hayes said to Odom, "I do. The last video showed landmarks, a distinctive rock formation, a burned-out vehicle. I've been trying to identify the location for weeks. I narrowed it down to 3 possible sites, all within our operational area." Porter looked at Odom. Porter said to Odom, "Sir, give me a team. Let me go get them. If we rescue Amira's family, it proves Hayes was being blackmailed. It changes the narrative from traitor to victim." Odom was quiet for a long moment. Odom said to Porter, "This is highly irregular. We'd be launching an operation based on intelligence from a suspected traitor. If this goes wrong, it could end both our careers. Porter said to Odom, "If we don't try, we're proving Hayes right, that we abandon the people who help us, that their lives don't matter. Is that who we want to be, sir?" Odom made a decision. Odom said to Porter, "You have 24 hours. I'll authorize a small reconnaissance team. Official story is, we're following up on intelligence about a Taliban safe house. If you find the hostages, bring them home. If you don't, we proceed with Hayes's court-martial and this conversation never happened. Clear?" Porter said to Odom, "Crystal clear, sir." Hayes looked at Porter with desperate hope. Hayes said to Porter, "Michael, if you find them, tell Amira I'm sorry. Tell her I tried." Porter said to Hayes, "Tell her yourself when we get back." Porter assembled a team, 6 men, soldiers Porter trusted absolutely. Corporal Briggs, the best tracker in the unit. Private First Class Warren, who spoke fluent Pashto. Specialist Ortiz, their medic. Sergeant Vega, demolitions expert. Private Keller, communications, and Porter. Porter briefed them on the real mission, told them about Hayes, about the blackmail, about the hostages. To their credit, none of them questioned the orders. They'd all worked with Amira. They all understood the debt they owed to interpreters who risked their lives for American soldiers. They moved out at dusk. The first location Hayes had identified was a compound in a valley 30 kilometers from base. Remote. Defensible. Perfect for holding hostages. The team approached carefully, used night vision to scout the perimeter, counted 6 tangos, armed, alert. This was no abandoned site. Briggs spotted them first. Through a window, 3 figures tied to chairs, 2 small, 1 adult, alive. Porter signaled the team. They had found them. The assault was quick and brutal. Breaching charges, flashbangs, overwhelming violence of action. The insurgents never had a chance to react. Within 90 seconds, all 6 were down. No American casualties. Porter cut the hostages free. 2 girls, maybe 8 and 10 years old. Their mother, all showing signs of abuse, malnourished, terrified, but alive. Warren spoke to them in Pashto, explained who the team was, that they were safe, that they were going home. The mother collapsed in tears. The girls clung to their mother, too traumatized to cry. Ortiz treated their injuries while Warren called for extraction. A helicopter would meet them at a landing zone 2 kilometers away. As they prepared to move, the older girl tugged on Porter's sleeve. She said something in Pashto. Warren translated. The girl said to Porter through Warren, "Is the American officer okay? The one who tried to help us? They said they would kill him if we were rescued." Porter's blood ran cold. Porter asked Warren to ask the girl, "What do you mean? What American officer?" The girl explained through Warren. She said to Porter, "The man who called sometimes, who tried to send help. They showed us his picture, said his name was Lieutenant Hayes, said if anyone came for us, they would know Hayes sent them, and they would kill Hayes." Porter realized the trap immediately. The Taliban had been monitoring Hayes's attempts to locate the family, had deliberately left clues, had wanted the Americans to find the hostages. Because the moment they did, they'd trigger a response, a retaliation, against Hayes. Porter grabbed the radio. Porter called base. Porter said urgently, "Copper base, this is Porter. We have the hostages, but Hayes is in danger. The Taliban might have people inside the wire. We need Hayes in protective custody immediately." The response came back broken with static. Then clearly, too clearly, Odom's voice said to Porter, "Porter, Hayes is dead. Suicide. Hayes hanged himself in his cell 20 minutes ago." Porter felt the world stop. Porter said into the radio, "Say again, sir?" Odom said to Porter, "Hayes is dead, Sergeant. We found him in his cell. Apparent suicide. Left a note confessing everything, taking full responsibility." But Porter knew it wasn't suicide. Knew the Taliban had people everywhere, even inside American facilities. Knew they'd made good on their threat. Hayes had been murdered to cover the conspiracy, to ensure no one would investigate further. The mother spoke again. Warren translated. She said to Porter, "The lieutenant saved our lives. He gave them information, yes, but only to keep us alive. He was good man. He suffered for us. Please tell his people. He was hero, not traitor." Porter looked at the mother, at the two girls, at the evidence of Hayes's sacrifice. Porter said to Warren to tell her, "We'll make sure everyone knows the truth. Your family will testify, we'll clear his name." But even as Porter said it, Porter knew the reality. Hayes was dead. Officially a suicide. Officially a traitor. The military wouldn't want the story told. Wouldn't want to admit they'd abandoned local nationals. Wouldn't want to explain how the Taliban had infiltrated their security. Hayes would be buried quietly, dishonorably. His family would live with the shame, and the truth would die with him, unless Porter fought for it. Back at base, Porter refused to let it go. Porter demanded an investigation into Hayes's death. Porter insisted the hostages testify. Porter pushed Captain Odom to pursue the truth. Odom called Porter into Odom's office. Odom said to Porter, "Sergeant, let this go. Hayes is dead. The hostages are safe. Mission accomplished. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." Porter said to Odom, "Sir, Hayes was murdered. You know it. I know it. We can't let them win. We can't let a good man die branded as a traitor when he was trying to save innocent lives." Odom said to Porter quietly, "Hayes made his choices. Bad choices. He leaked classified information that got Americans killed. Yes, he had reasons. Sympathetic reasons. But the end doesn't justify the means. If we expose this, it undermines everything. It tells every soldier that betraying your unit is acceptable if you have a good reason. That's a line we can't cross." Porter said to Odom, "So we lie? We let Hayes be remembered as a traitor?" Odom said to Porter, "We let Hayes be remembered as a complicated man who made terrible choices in an impossible situation. But officially, yes. He's a traitor who couldn't live with his guilt. That's the story. And you need to accept that, Sergeant. For your own good." Porter understood the threat. Pushed too hard, and Porter would join Hayes. Not literally, but career-wise. Porter would be marginalized, transferred, forced out. The military protected its own reputation above all else. Porter had to choose. Fight for Hayes's memory and lose everything, or accept the lie and live with the guilt. Porter thought about Anders, about Lynch, about all the soldiers put at risk by Hayes's actions. Hayes had made bad choices, understandable choices, but bad ones nonetheless. But Porter also thought about Amira's family, about two little girls who were alive because Hayes had sacrificed everything, about a man who tried to do the right thing in a situation with no right answers. Porter made a decision. Porter said to Odom, "I'll follow orders, sir, officially, but I'm keeping a record. Everything. The letter, the hostage rescue, the testimony. And someday, when this war is over and the politics don't matter anymore, I'm going to tell Hayes' story, the real story, so his family knows the truth, so history remembers him correctly." Odom looked at Porter for a long moment. Odom said to Porter, "That's fair, Sergeant. Just make sure someday doesn't come while I'm still in uniform." Porter kept his word. Porter stayed quiet, watched Hayes get buried without honors, watched Hayes' wife collapse at the funeral, unable to understand how her husband had become a traitor. Porter wanted to tell her, wanted to explain, but Porter couldn't. Not yet. Years later, after Porter left the military, after the war ended, after enough time had passed that the truth couldn't hurt anyone still serving, Porter wrote it all down, published it, told Hayes' story exactly as it happened. The book caused controversy. Some called Porter a liar. Some called Hayes a hero. Most acknowledged the truth was complicated. That war creates impossible situations where good people make terrible choices. Hayes' wife read the book. She called Porter. She thanked Porter through tears for giving her back her husband's memory, for letting her children know their father wasn't a monster, just a man who tried to save lives and paid the ultimate price. Amira read it too. She'd become an American citizen, worked as a translator for the State Department. She wrote Porter a letter. She said Hayes had saved her family, that she'd been ready to give up, to accept they were gone. But Hayes had refused to abandon them, had fought until the end. And that's what Porter wanted people to remember. Not the betrayal, not the treason, but the fight, the refusal to give up on the people who'd believed in America, the willingness to sacrifice everything for what Hayes believed was right. Was Hayes wrong? Objectively, yes. Hayes had violated his oath, had endangered his men, had crossed lines that should never be crossed. But was Hayes evil? No. Hayes was human, flawed, desperate, backed into a corner where every choice led to tragedy. And Hayes had chosen to try to save innocent lives, even knowing it would cost Hayes everything. That complexity is what Porter wanted preserved. Because war isn't simple, isn't clean, isn't about heroes and villains. It's about people trying to survive impossible situations and making choices they'll have to live with forever. Or in Hayes' case, die with. Porter kept the letter, the one Porter had found in the Taliban compound. The evidence that started everything. Porter framed it, hung it in Porter's office. A reminder that the world is more complicated than it appears, that enemies and allies aren't always clear, that sometimes the person betraying you is also the person trying to save you, and that honor isn't simple, isn't just about following orders. It's about making hard choices and living with the consequences, whether those consequences are fair or not. Hayes made his choice, paid the price, and years later, Porter made sure Hayes wasn't forgotten, wasn't reduced to a simple traitor or simple hero, but remembered as what Hayes actually was, a soldier who tried to do good in a place where good was impossible, and paid for it with everything.